Welcome to this live blog and podcast by CJ Online and the Topeka Capital Journal. You asked, and we're going to answer. My name is Tim Hrenchir. I'm a reporter for the Topeka Capital Journal, and we have a program where our readers send in questions and we ask them to public officials who provide answers. Last July, Dr. Jason Peak, the director of the City of Topeka's Public Works Department, came on a podcast and live blog to answer questions about the city's streets. And since then, we've got about 35 more questions, so we're bringing them back again. If any time exists at the end of this podcast, we will also answer questions posed online during this roughly hour-long program. Well, welcome, Dr. Peak.
Thanks for having me again, Tim. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. We appreciate that you're willing to come online and answer questions from the public. This is a great public service.
Sure.
So the first question, there's two involved with the same situation. How can the city of Topeka allow traffic barricades to remain on Southwest 29th at Fairlawn after construction season and during snow removal season? And also, how much longer are the public and businesses to be held hostage to super slow lane expansions at 29th and Fairlawn? It was started in July. Jason?
Sure, Tim. Well, as many of you know, this is a great project. This is a developer project going on there at 29th and Fairlawn. It's the Wheatfield development. And so part of those road improvements were necessary to accommodate the additional traffic we anticipate the development to generate. We've been working with the developer on that project, and those traffic control is necessary to allow the construction to continue. That project will continue into next year, and the traffic control will be removed when it's safe to do so.
Okay. What's the issue in the 2500 block of Southwest Fairlawn? It appears the street surface is subsiding.
Yeah, great question there as well. We talk a lot about streets, and what people don't see is what's going on underneath the streets. We actually have a large 48 to 54 inch storm sewer. This is a large pipe that's underneath the street there that it's corrugated metal and it's failing. We had an emergency project let this fall, and the construction has started on that basically to get in there and replace that pipe. So they'll be removing the roadway, digging down, removing the pipe, and replacing that to get that back open.
Any idea how long that's going to take?
We anticipate the project will be completed in January of 2019.
Okay, that's good information there. Why is one of the northbound lanes on Fairlawn between 25th and 26th tier shut down? That's what you just talked about. So
yes.
Why is it the city will not check out the great need for a sidewalk on Northwest Lyman Road?
Sure. So we know pedestrian mobility is a big need within the city of Topeka, and I think we've made a lot of great strides in that. Part of it's just the amount of resources and priorities to distribute those. The city of Topeka completed the pedestrian master plan back in 2016. Within that master plan, which is available online through the planning department's website, folks can go in and look, and they basically did an inventory of existing sidewalks and where we needed to connect those existing sidewalks to fill in those gaps. And so that plan specifies how we direct our annual budget for sidewalk improvements. And then more at what I'd say a micro scale is we take on roadway projects and look at basically reconstruction or changing the look of that corridor. We typically do include what we call complete streets concepts, being able to accommodate the different users of those systems. So we realize that sometimes that doesn't fit, within the priority of a citizen that may live on, say, Lyman Road as opposed to someone else in the city, but we do kind of work that pedestrian master plan on an annual basis.
So you don't know whether the specific sidewalk on Lyman Road is part of that, though?
It's not part of the current CIP to put a sidewalk out there, but I would say is that pedestrian master plan is what document for putting those sidewalks in.
Okay. How many weeks or months has Southeast 37th at Indiana been closed during 2018, and why?
Yeah, so this, a lot of different people work within our corridors throughout the city. The primary work that's been going on out there for that closure is part of Kansas Gas Service as they work to repair and replace the natural gas infrastructure throughout the community. And so that's been a year.
Okie doke. What is the, let's see here. Could the timing on traffic lights on South Topeka at 45th and at Kansas Avenue and Turnpike be any worse? Are road sensors cameras in use? And then there was one related question. Who or what regulates the traffic lights in Topeka?
Yeah, great question, Tim. And I want to, I guess, take the last piece about road sensors or cameras in use. And we have a number of different ways that we manage traffic flow within the city of Topeka. We have basically video camera detection. A lot of times you'll see at the traffic signal a video camera mounted on the mast arm, and that's there to kind of recognize traffic. We also have what are called in-pavement loops, where you may see lines in the pavement in either a square or hexagonal shape, and those can detect vehicles. We also use radar and infrared to detect vehicles. We've got a number of different detection things in there. From time to time, those sensors, don't work, and so we have to get out there and replace those. So not sure specifically, was that a specific instance that person had at that intersection, or if it's what they experience as a continual problem. I think that gets to just looking at how we regulate traffic flow within the city. So we may have a signal that has several what we call time of day plans. So it adjusts how much green time it gives to different movement depending on where the highest volume that needs to be served. An example that I like to use about traffic signals is pi. Each cycle, red, green, yellow on each movement, there's only so much pi to go around at each cycle, and some people want more share of that pi than we can give them, and we've got to kind of accommodate the larger traffic movements out there. So it's a balancing act. In other areas of the city, we have what are called adaptive signal management systems, and these would be like at 29th and Fairlawn and some of those higher volume corridors. And what that signal system does, it actually has a computer algorithm that is dynamically adjusting the time in response to the traffic flow that's moving through there. And it works great in maximizing our throughput through those intersections. But the problem with dynamic or adaptive signal timing is the signal timing is different every time. And so some people that are kind of expecting that normal routine and feel like, hey, yesterday I got through here and now it's not serving me. That's a reality that traffic signal is adapting in real time to the traffic that's there. Last year we put in our completed installation of upgrading our signal controllers and cabinets to be ready for connected vehicles, to have the kind of communication infrastructure in there. We're making analysis of those traffic intersections as well to look at timing, identify those intersections that we need to do retiming. We have within the downtown area, we had a CIP project also approved to look at updating signal timing. So it's a constant thing that we have to look at updating those timings in intersections throughout the city. We have a little over 183 traffic signals throughout the city of Topeka.
Do you know anything about the reader's specific question about Topeka Boulevard and the Turnpike?
I didn't so we have video detection at that intersection. As to the comment about can it get any worse, like I said, a lot of that's perception. We have the timings in place basically to serve the predominant traffic flow volume. So side street traffic oftentimes feels like they're not being served as adequately. And we're looking at basically measuring the throughput of all vehicles through the intersection, not just the leg that the commenter came from. So that's how to answer that.
Okay. And as a follow-up question, the city was advertising for a traffic engineer. Has that position been filled yet?
We feel very fortunate. We brought on a good staff person. She's been on board with us for a little over a month now, so starting to get up to speed on the different issues within the city, and we'll be working to make improvements in the traffic signal area.
Good to know. This reader says, the roundabout at Southwest 37th and Wanamaker resembles an ancient Aztec burial mound. Any plans to make it more attractive?
So I think beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and we definitely realize there's been some aesthetic complaints at that roundabout. A lot of these roundabouts, when the landscaping went in, we still had the Parks and Recreation Department was part of the city, so we had resources basically to maintain more intensive landscaping. We don't have those resources anymore, so we're retooling those roundabouts. We started a project this year, basically at that roundabout and 4 others to redo the landscaping. It'll be more consistent with what you see at the recently constructed roundabout at 37th in California, which is a mixture of stone, trees, and some small plants. It reduces the intensity of maintenance needed to keep it up, and I think it will be a better look than what's out there today.
Very informative. You're not going to get that information anywhere except at the Topeka Capital Journal and CJ Online. Well, maybe on the city website. I don't know for sure. So why does the city tear up multiple streets at the same time, and do you realize this can be problematic?
We know that our road construction has an impact on traffic around town, and we work very hard to kind of plan and sequence that. A lot of it's just the timing, as we get into some of these other comments and the comments we answered this summer. We have a lot of roads in need of reconstruction. That's a very intensive process, not only to rebuild the pavement, but get the utilities addressed underground. And then, the expectation that a lot of these roads that we keep open, we had a few closures this summer. We were able to kind of close an entire intersection at 21st in Kansas, or we were able to close the hill out there at Huntoon. But, as we mentioned in the earlier comment, 29th and Fairlawn, we've got road construction going on, and we've got to keep that open to traffic. And so, short answer, it's a balancing act. We try and pick these projects and minimize it. I will tell you, kind of looking down the road, we've got a number of what we call the countywide projects on some of our east-west corridors, 12th Street, 17th Street, Huntoon, these 3-mile corridors. And we're looking at early planning phases of what's the right sequence to have those roads under construction so that we do minimize that impact to the traveling public. But ultimately, we have to get in the road and do the work, and that's an inconvenience to people. We realize that. But the net result is some really good streets at the end of that. So we appreciate their patience in waiting through construction.
And the latter projects you're referring to are being financed through a countywide half-cent sales tax approved by voters in 2014.
2017.
Well, that's when it started.
Yeah, it was renewed in 2017, and that basically gave a list of very specific projects that the voters wanted to see. Mm-hmm. A lot of the larger arterial projects that were included with that ballot initiative.
And a lot of them include widening.
It basically allows us to look at what needs to be done on those streets. It may be some additional width to the lanes, but I wouldn't say that they were what we call capacity enhancement projects going from a 3 to a 5 lane or things like that.
Okay. Let's see here. I have lived on Tidewater for over 10 years. My curb is gone, and I have been taxed money to have it fixed, but not once did they come out.
Yeah, so we have a lot of curb in need of replacement throughout the city of Topeka, and the citywide, or the Fix Our Streets sales tax program that the voters just reauthorized in November has been our primary source to fund those curb replacements. And we have about a 5-year backlog, to be honest, on where we are with those curb replacements. We're looking at retooling that program so that a lot of them are kind of what we call piecemeal projects. I replace a piece of curb on your street, and then I go 3 blocks over, replace a piece of curb over there. How do we sync those curb replacement projects up with the work that we're doing on pavement management so we get better prices? So we're working through that, and I'm sorry that the gentleman's having to wait, but we've got a number of people on that backlog, and we're just trying to work through that.
Okay. Wasn't the Gage Boulevard Road project south of 21st Street supposed to add a left turn for safety? It says the VA hospital entrance causes backups during the day.
Yeah, so that portion was constructed with the Fix Our Streets half-cent city sales tax funds. Those funds can only be used to replace existing infrastructure, so we can't do widening or expansion or adding new elements with those funds. That was just what we call a maintenance and rehabilitation project. So that project did not anticipate widening for that, and so there wasn't a turn lane included in that project.
Okay. This reader asks, how much more paving expense to replace the additional half block of asphalt in poor condition on eastbound 29th at Burlingame? It says it looks terrible next to the new road.
Sure. So, I think as I understood that question, we have elements that are outside the project that are in poor shape. And so each year as we kind of develop and scope out these projects, we kind of have to draw a line of where we're going to stop, what that scope of project's going to include. And that may be to, keep access open to businesses or residents or other streets. And so that's maybe that demarcation line out there on Southeast 29th. And then just the budget of what we can do, and then the schedule is coming back to the question of how long are these things going to be under construction? What can we get accomplished in a construction season? So all of those factors kind of limit what we accomplish on an annual basis, and that's why we didn't continue going east on Southeast 29th Street.
Okay. The next question, what exactly is going on Southeast 29th between West Edge Road and Croco Road?
So let me see, Southeast 29th between West Edge and Croco Road, that's currently a county project out there. They're replacing the bridge as well as widening that road. So the current work that's going on is the utility relocations in advance of construction next year. And so if people want more specific information, they can reach out to the county on that project.
Okay. And this person here, Jason has been the Topeka's Public Works Director since early 2016. This person refers to some history that happened before. The question specifically asks how a local business permanently stopped the street replacement along Gage between 37th and 45th, and why has it not been rescheduled?
Yeah, so I don't know the specific history of that discussion between the business owner, but I understand that project was kind of shelved at that time. We continue to look at that along with all our other pavement management programs and look at when is the appropriate time to do improvements out there. We understand people are frustrated with the joint conditions of that concrete pavement, and some of the spalling. We'll keep it in a serviceable condition until we're ready to do a full project out there.
Okay. Why do some main roads have no sidewalks at all, or just sidewalks on one side?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just thinking about our evolution as a city. As we had kind of our urban core and our older areas, a lot of those areas and neighborhoods were built with sidewalks. As the city grew and we annexed land that maybe was in the county or outside the city limits, there weren't requirements to put sidewalks in. We as a city had requirements that only required it on one side of the street at different points and times, and so it's just kind of reflecting different design philosophies over time. I think the city now as a whole, we recognize, like I said, pedestrian mobility is important. We work to kind of make those complete streets as we take on new projects and add those pedestrian elements, but we have a lot of streets out there that are just an artifact of it at the time that they were constructed.
So the pedestrian plan is targeted at solving some of these problems, but it won't happen right away.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Let's see here. It says, asks for an update from you regarding road project completion dates and projects rolling in 2019, and also is curious about how many of this year's projects have been within budget.
Yeah, so all of our projects have been within budget this year. If we have a project that is over budget, we have to go back to the city council and actually request for budget amendment approval. So we're on budget, and I'd say we're on schedule with our projects. We have a few, the Huntoon project that, basically they're working on things outside the right of way and will be opening up here in December. But the majority of our projects opened up actually prior to Thanksgiving this year, and I think that's just a reflection of how we've changed our process internally to make sure we get utilities and things like that relocated in advance of construction, that we give contractors an adequate amount of time to get out there and do the work and get it finished in advance of the colder temperatures that we're seeing today.
And could you talk about some of the major projects for next year?
So, you'll see continuation on Southwest Gage. We're going to continue working south out there with some of that rehabilitation work. Southeast Adams, 33rd to 37th. We've just had a couple meetings for road projects. North Topeka on North Kansas Avenue, Northwest Vale, and Silver Lake Road, working on a section up there. We've got some very large projects, the countywide projects. We're starting design work and we'll be holding meetings. First one of that is Southwest 12th Street. which is basically a 3-mile corridor along 12th Street that we'll be reconstructing. So several major projects. We're going to continue also the preventative maintenance work that you saw throughout the city this summer, the microsurfacing. We've got another 75 miles of that planned. That'll be hitting a lot of the local streets, generally outside of the downtown core and east of the old Highway 75 corridor. That'll be, you'll see some crack sealing work in advance of that. And then we'll have a number of what we call localized mill and overlay and patching projects throughout the city.
The 75 miles of microsurfacing, how does that compare to what was done this year?
So we're a little over 80 miles with microsurfacing this year. We estimate about 75 miles, and then depending on the bid price as a contractor and budget available, work within that budget. A lot of that work was done in the central part of Topeka. We've kind of divided that out over 3 years. That first year was central, second year will be east, and the third year we'll be moving to the west side of city limits and doing about the same amount every year, assuming the same bid prices.
Okay. The next question says Huntoon / Arvonia, $3.6 million, $1 million per mile for reconstruction. How many miles long is Huntoon Hill?
Yeah, so the 1 million per mile for reconstruction, that's what the ballpark estimate we use is 1 million per lane mile. So first of all, you got to multiply by the number of lanes of street on that, and then depending on the construction, we had a lot of significant excavation work on that project where we lowered the grade of that hill to make it less steep. It's still a pretty steep approach. I guess the short answer to how many miles long, it's a little over a quarter mile for the hill over 3 lanes. But we had a number of, it also included part of the intersection work there as well as the ramp work at I-70. So it wasn't just the Huntoon project. And then some of the design work will be continuing on to Southwest Arvonia as part of next year's project, and actually relocating Winding Road to get it further away from the signalized intersection so the queues at the intersection don't impede traffic with Winding Road.
So the $3.6 million figure for that project, that's this year and next year,
That's
or just
the,
this
yeah,
year?
the total project's a little over 5 million, but the 3.6 was a portion of the cost, including design work. You also have right-of-way acquisition, so we have to acquire property for easements and things like that. So it's all rolled in that. And like I said, the planning number we use is, you could say, $1 million per lane mile for a residential street, or up to $1.5 million on an arterial corridor like this. And that's a ballpark estimate. As you get in the details, like I said, lowering a road by 5 feet, I mean, that's a significant amount of excavation and work that has to be done. There's a signalized intersection as part of that cost, so it's not just the pavement cost. Included with that, the stormwater infrastructure, all those pieces really make that arterial an expensive replacement project.
Okay. The next question is Southwest 17th Street going to be included in the current pavement overlay project?
Yeah, so I think part of this was a timing of the question. So we did what we call an interim mill and overlay and some repairs out there near I-470 on Southwest 17th to basically hold it as we start to develop the plans. We have planning money available to start design work on that project. It will lag behind Southwest 12th Street. That's part of looking at corridors and how we impede traffic. And then that is part of the countywide project, which will include whether it's mill and overlay or full depth reconstruction in sections, as well as sidewalk, curb and gutter, and those other pieces to that project.
Has the city of Topeka considered creating public access to the south side of the Kansas River through property owned by the city?
Yeah, so I'm not as directly involved with that project, but the city of Topeka has a riverfront authority. There's also been kind of a couple of planning phases done along the river corridor, looking at what the riverfront could be, and they're exploring options like that about how do we provide access to the river to activate the river, and I know those plans are in the works.
When will repairs be done to Southwest Uris Road between 21st and 29th?
So under the CIP we had last year, we have that slated for 2024 and 2025 for basically a reconstruction of that roadway corridor.
Okay, so that's a 2-year project. You'll do half of it 1 year and half the next?
I mean, as we get closer to design, we'll have better details on the schedule. And so on projects like that, where we have a, kind of a defined CIP, and assuming it stays in the CIP because we go through this process annually, we will continue to do patching and things like that to keep it in a serviceable condition until the larger project comes along.
Okay. And this says 17th Street between Fairlawn and Wanamaker is horrible. Will it be improved if the sales tax is renewed?
So, as part of the pavement management plan, we continue to look at all streets on that. We have the countywide project for Southwest 17th, which is McVicker to I-470. So we'll look at those coordination of those projects, but I don't have that specific section identified in the current scope.
Okay. This question is about Southeast 29th near California. Will Southeast 29th at the Dillon store ever be returned to 2 westbound lanes?
So ever's a long time, but what I can tell you is, that traffic change was made as part of that redevelopment out there. So for the foreseeable future, we see that continuing. We'll continue to monitor the situation. If safety or capacity changes dictate a different turn, then we might look at change that. But in the short term, the answer would be no.
Okay. How much of the sales tax money was spent on bike lanes, signage, etc.?
Sure. So always a complicated question because we have a couple of different sales tax. What I'd say is the sales tax that was just renewed, zero, was spent on bike lanes. That was basically look at it replacing existing infrastructure that was out there. So it was not used to build a new bike network. The countywide sales tax program, though, that was renewed in 2017, included $500,000 every other year for implementation of the Bikeways Master Plan. And so that sales tax program is being used to implement different bike lane infrastructure. We've been able to take those funds and use those as matching dollars with KDOT. We recently got what's called a transportation alternative grant to add bike lanes along Southwest 8th, basically from Topeka Boulevard through the hospital there, Stormont Vale, as well as add some bike lanes on Lane and Washburn. And that project will be happening this spring.
And the rest of the question says signage, etc. Could you address that?
So I'm not sure if it meant like bike signage. So like I said, unless it's existing signage that was replaced as part of that Fix Our Streets fund, I mean, it would only be used to replace existing. A lot of the bike infrastructure was not existing at the time we kind of touched those corridors. The countywide portion, if we need to add bike signage and things like that as part of the bike lane, that would be included in that project.
Okay. The next question says, why does repairing 1 mile of road take Topeka 6 months to a year when Overland Park does it in 1 month?
Yeah, so I'd be curious to know the location and the repair techniques done over in Overland Park. What I'd say is, for us, it depends on what is the repair strategy. We talked about the preventative maintenance work we did, the full width surface sealing. We touched, like I said, over 80 miles of streets in 2 months here in Topeka. So, I mean, that's pretty quick. A lot of the mill and overlay that we do in neighborhoods or, on those local streets, 1 month to 2 months, depending on the scope and size of the neighborhood, we can make that happen. But then when you get into these reconstruction projects, where we're removing entire roadway, coordinating utilities, and if we're having to provide access to businesses and residents along that corridor, there's a lot more coordination efforts, and those projects definitely take longer. I haven't seen anything outside the norm of just general transportation construction within the city of Topeka. As I said, back in July, we had a lot of things we needed to fix with our internal processes, with the utility coordination, so we could give contractors a full construction season, get utilities cleared out of the way so they could get in there and get the job done. And we continue to make those improvements. As we talked about projects carrying over, we've got our projects complete this year and open to traffic with the ones that we had scheduled. So We continue to make improvements, but if someone would send in that project Overland Park, I'd be interested in talking to them and figuring out what it is, and maybe there's some lessons we could learn on how we could do our job better.
The next question is, why do they need 5 lanes from Southwest 21st and Uris when 3 were plenty?
Sure. I don't know the specifics on when that project was designed, but what I can tell you is, a lot of people, not a lot of people, what I should say is the transportation industry has changed over time. A lot of those 5-lane roads that were built on our kind of outward arterials were anticipation of future growth and development. As traffic engineers have continued to look at how do we handle capacity and things that we could do, the emphasis changed on looking at intersections as opposed to corridors, and that we can accommodate a lot of traffic on a 3-lane corridor as long as we have our traffic signalized intersection or roundabout working to receive and distribute that traffic. I know within the city of Topeka, our philosophy has changed. You've seen that we've built, taken a lot of corridors to 3 lanes, Southwest 6 from Gage to Fairlawn, as well as Southwest 10th from Gage to Fairlawn. We basically took those to 3-lane corridors, but you can see that Southwest 10th corridor there at Fleming Place. We do have additional width there, basically for the turn lanes as we approach that intersection, and that's what I meant by that kind of wide nodes approach to design. So I think it's just a change in design philosophy, or expectation for development that didn't occur. What may have been why that 5-lane corridor was out there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
The next question is more of a statement for you to respond to. It says, North Topeka Boulevard, Old 75 Highway is 2-lane. Should be a minimum of 3 lanes with a turn lane. Traffic count is as high or higher than Wanamaker and Croco.
So a couple things I'd say on that is we went through last year what was called the Futures 2040. This is our annual long-range transportation plan. That involves kind of running a traffic model of the city and the surrounding areas to look at where are we going to have congestion problems in the future, where are we experiencing congestion problems today, and what types of improvements are needed to handle that. As we look through the model, I mean, that section of roadway did not appear as one that was of concern related to congestion. So there was not what we would call a capacity project programmed for that the traffic flow was adequate. We are in the process of developing a traffic safety plan. A lot of those 2-lane roadways where we have turning movements can be areas of conflict and go into, as the question submitter said, can help improve the safety if we kind of have that center turn lane for turning movements. We're looking systematically across the city at where are we having these issues, and then what is the appropriate, what we call countermeasure to help reduce accidents. So it's not to say that couldn't be done in the future, but at this time we don't have a project plan for that corridor.
The next question, why does the city shut down multiple streets for projects at once rather than just centering on one project at a time?
Yeah, so we have a lot of kind of competing demands within the city. The mayor and council have challenged us to fix our streets, and that's what we're working to do. As we've talked about with you in the past about the pavement management program, what does that take to fix our streets? And the mayor and council set a goal to basically raise our overall pavement condition over the next 10 years from where we were in 2016 at a 55 with a goal to be at a 60 in 10 years. And what does that mean? That means that, basically we're starting to reduce the backload or our backlog of those streets in poor condition. And so in order to do that, we've got to accomplish a lot of work every year to meet that goal. And so we are focused on, those primary preventive maintenance projects that's going to extend the life of our good roads, the medium term or what we call rehab projects, mill and overlays that can be done quickly. And then we still will have a lot of that reconstruction, the ones that people see out there for an entire season or possibly 2 seasons of construction, all with that goal of making the streets of Topeka better.
Thanks. The next question involves when something will be done about the city's potholes and dilapidated roadways.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of information out there on our website about the pavement management program that I just talked to you about, and just kind of reiterate a couple of points as we looked at that concern about potholes. It wasn't that potholes were the problem; it was about putting together what we called a comprehensive program to fix our streets, and that means that we're investing in the preventative maintenance. We talk about that with folks in that you buy a new car, that car needs an oil change within 3 to 5,000 miles. When we build a new road, it's going to need preventative maintenance within 3 to 5 years. So at a minimum, we have to invest that. If we invest in preventative maintenance, we're reducing the possibility or probability of potholes appearing on that road. At the same time, we're investing in rehabilitation strategies, mill and overlay, patching, panel repair. That definitely addresses potholes within streets on an annual basis. And then ultimately, those streets that are in such poor condition, the most effective use of tax dollars is to reconstruct those. We either schedule those for a reconstruction project, and that requires a lot of effort for design, utility coordination, and then just planning of the traffic control for the work. And then lastly, as the person alluded to, we still have streets that we're not able to address with the resources we have that will have potholes. And so that's part of our maintenance staff being able to actively respond to those pothole requests and keep our roads in a serviceable condition. But potholes will continue to be a problem until we're able to kind of implement our plan and reduce the amount within the city.
Okay. The next question, why do we have to have a traffic light by French Middle School when school is not in session? We now have 4 lights and a 4-block radius.
Yeah, so we have to have lights on a corridor to handle day-to-day traffic, and the signal timing adjusts for those off-peak seasons. But drivers are creatures or habits. Traffic lights are not something that we'd turn off for a season and then turn back on, because we don't want to confuse driver expectation. I mean, the timings do adjust so that they're not as frequent during the low school times, but we still need to be able to allow traffic to get around safely, and so that's what signal control does at intersections like that.
Okay. This next question is about a topic, Southwest 17th, that we discussed a bit earlier, but it says, who is prioritizing what streets get repaved in Topeka? 17th between McVicker and Wanamaker. Terrible, side streets are repaved is what the question says.
Yeah, and so we talked a lot with council about trying to shift our focus from a project basis. So having, if you asked everybody in the city what project should we be spending our street money on, you get a lot of different answers. I want my neighborhood street fixed, or I want you to fix this street that I commute to work on. And we asked council, said, really, if you want to address this problem, we need to take a program approach, which looks at kind of that goal. What do you want the ultimate street condition of City of Topeka to do or to be? And council's agreed to that. And then with that program, that helps us say, okay, here's the goal. And then the next piece of that is how much budget do we have to reach that goal? And so annually we work through the budget that's available. We're very grateful that the voters renewed the Fix Our Streets sales tax for the city program. That gives us certainty in funding of our budget to implement this plan. But we look annually, say, what's the best investment of those dollars to reach that goal? And so we actually use a model, a mathematical model that looks at the condition of all the streets in Topeka. It looks at the cost of the different investment strategies we have. We talk about investment strategies or maintenance strategies, whether it's preventative maintenance, rehabilitation, or reconstruction. And so within that model, it kind of allocates those dollars about here would be the best investment of those dollars to reach that goal. And we take that output from the model, and then we have to basically ground truth that, because we're not just talking about streets. We have our utilities infrastructure that we need to think about. Where are the water lines being replaced? We also have to think about where's development occurring, like the Wheatfield Village development. And so we have to take those real inputs, then put them back into the model and say, okay, based on that, do we still have the same plan? And we do that on an annual basis, and that's kind of how the projects get recommended. We present those to council through an annual CIP process that sets the work plan for the next 3 years. And so every year we're bringing that next third year of projects into that.
So the projects where you make the minor little improvements, do those get approved by the council also?
They get approved in kind of a project basis. It'd be like a preventative maintenance project.
Mhm.
We can provide list of what streets are included within that to
Mhm.
council, but they're not going in and picking every individual street. I mean, we're providing that information to them to say this investment will help us get to the PCI goal that they've defined as a governing body.
Okay. Um, this question kind of goes back before your time, but what happened to the $4 million per year spent on major street projects before 2010? Wasn't the half percent street sales tax supposed to be added?
Yeah, so kind of coming back to that discussion about our CIP process. So the GO bonds is where a lot of that $4 million, as I understand it, came prior to 2010. The city, during that period, was looking to how do we get on better financial ground. And one of those things that the decision was made in the city that has really helped us out was to look at our GO bond, or basically our debt spending, to put us on a good standing for our bond ratings.
Mm-hmm.
And so roughly that equates to about a $9 million cap on GO bond expenditures annually over a 3-year period. With that, basically we not only pay for streets, but we pay for some of our public safety, our fire and police. We also pay for some of our neighborhood improvements as well as some of our facility improvements through that GO bond. So I think, prior to that policy be in place about our GO bond spending, there may have been room to spend more than what we can now with the cap that's in place.
Would it be accurate to characterize the GO bond spending as being more like buying something with a credit card, whereas with the current arrangement, we're paying cash?
So I mean, GO bond is definitely. I mean, you are borrowing money to pay for it, and you're amortizing that cost over 15 years typically.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a balancing act of just understanding, what is the right balance of debt service that the city can afford, maintain our bond rating, to get good interest rates, as well as stay within the existing budget. So a lot of different things going on with that.
Okay. One more question. Why does the city not have more of the flashing yellow left turn lights, such as the one installed at I-470 in Fairlawn? They speed up traffic.
So it definitely provides more opportunities for folks to make left turns under that kind of caution condition than what we call a protected left turn. So it's a trade-off in safety. We are looking at that as at each intersection, if it makes sense to add that flashing yellow. The short answer is you'll see more of them in Topeka. We do have locations where that will be appropriate. A couple things we have to look at, if it's adding a signal head and additional signals to it, does the mast arm have the capacity to support the additional weight? We have outfitted basically electronics or the computer capability to accommodate that. So as we work through them, you'll see some, but you won't see them everywhere.
Okay. Well, as we did our podcast in July, in the midst of the podcast, 3 people submitted questions. And I'm going to be checking now with online editor Eric Smith to see if we've got any today.
Yeah, we've gotten quite a few questions of people asking about streets. A few of them you've already covered. I'll throw out a couple, and if you think you've answered it, just say as much. Basically, someone was having a little trouble with their alleys, and they wanted to know, does the city fix alleys, like potholes in alleys, and if so, they were a little upset with their alley. But is that something?
Yeah, so we have a number of alleys that we maintain in the city. Some are paved, some are not paved, all in different conditions. A lot of the service of alleys, have the solid waste service and some of the utility providers back there that have traffic. We do have funding through the Fix Our Streets sales tax program for reconstruction of certain alleys. That allows us to do about 2 blocks of alleys on an annual basis. So it doesn't cover a lot of ground, and a lot of those alleys, I understand, we're only able to go out there and fix a pothole.
There was a question, and you talked a little bit about Uris. They asked, when will Uris be 3-laned all the way, or is more than it is? And And also they ask why there are some roundabouts that are 2 lanes and some are 1 lane.
So, I mean, we talked about the Uris project, is in the CIP, forecasted out for, I think I said 24, was the start of construction out there for that. And, we would look at what is the appropriate, what we call typical section or number of lanes out there, curb and gutter, sidewalk, all that is part of that. As far as the different configurations of roundabouts, typically where you have a dual lane roundabout, those are going to be at what we call our higher traffic volume locations. The single lane roundabouts would be at lower traffic volume. So that's really the difference in those.
This seems like a question that comes up every once in a while, and I don't know if we've covered it today. Someone asked why so many water main breaks on the roads, and that's just like
Yeah, so it's a great question. As my counterpart, our utility director, likes to talk about, he's like, if you could drive our water lines, they'd be in the same or worse condition than our streets, but you just don't see it because they're underground. They're also impacted just by our climatic conditions. If we go into a hot season, expansion, contraction of the soil can put pressure on those water lines that may be in poor condition and cause them to break. We definitely had a rash of water main breaks, as the story you guys put out earlier this week or last week about that. It's a condition issue. We've got to have dollars to be able to replace those. We work hand in hand with our utilities partners to make sure on these roads we're reconstructing and we get the utilities done underneath that. But we're still going to have roads where water main breaks that we don't have road repair projects, and we'll have to continue working on that.
Mm-hmm. This question may not pertain to you, but someone asked if snow removal on roads, is the city strictly do that, or is it privatized?
Within city streets, it's a city function of Public Works to provide that service, and our focus is on what we call our emergency and primary arterial routes. That's where we put the majority of our effort.
Okay, and then there's, like I said, a handful of questions about people like, oh, what about this street or this street? I guess what would you say to people? Would you just say you're doing over time it's going to be done, and maybe just have a little bit of patience, or I don't know, like. Yeah.
So a couple things. I would direct people to the city website. We've got a lot of great information on there about current projects. Excuse me. So you can kind of see what's actually active. You can also go to the Pavement Management website, see information about your street condition. We also have what we call the forecast map, showing kind of what work is forecasted over the next 10 years. And so that's what we're working towards on a plan, but annually we evaluate that and update it. So it's not a guarantee if you see your projects in those out years that it's going to happen that year. Our CIP planning process, we set projects for the next 3 years annually, and those are the ones that basically mayor and council have approved, and those are the ones that we work on. So the annual CIP is another great place that people can go and see what projects are in there, and then that can be combined with our website to kind of see what's the forecast.
Okay, well, it looks like this podcast is coming near the end of the road, but before we close out, I'd like to ask Dr. Peak, anything else you'd like to say?
Well, Tim, I just thank you for letting us come on and being able to answer these questions. I think it's a great way to interact with the community and answer it, and just want to say to everyone to have a happy holiday season and Merry Christmas. And I'm very grateful that the community had the trust in us to renew the Fix Our Streets citywide sales tax. We're going to work hard to implement that plan and fix our streets in Topeka. So thank you.
You're welcome. This is Tim Hrenchir from the Topeka Capital Journal. Thanks for listening.